Hi, today I wanted to share my project where I create a ASP.NET MVC application in order to obtain a motivational quote from a API that is hosted on Rapid API. I will then take that motivational quote that I received and insert it into a MySQL database. I will do this in order to allow the user to view quotes that have been received from the API, and then also to be able to insert comments about each quote into the database as well. So I'll go ahead and get started by looking at my quote controller. And this quote controller is going to be the main controller that's used in my project in order to navigate throughout the pages. And the first thing that we'll look at here is for the index. I'm actually going to be using this page to display the last week's quotes. So we'll go ahead and pull that up and take a look. Now, the first thing that will happen whenever we want to view a quote is we're going to check and see if today's quote exists. So if today's quote exists, then we're just going to show the quotes that we have. But if today's quote does not exist, then we will need to generate a new quote. So we're going to go ahead and take a look and see how that looks as well. So here I have a breakpoint that's actually going to take me through and allow us to see what's going on as I'm sending this request to the API. But essentially I have a quote generator class here, which is going to use a REST client using the REST Sharp extension for Visual Studios. So I'm using this REST client to send a GET request to the motivational quotes API that is here on Rapid API. And I'm going to send into that REST request both the address that I'm sending it to, the request to, as well as my API key. And I'm going to go ahead and show what my response looks like here. So the reason why I want to show what my response looks like here is because this API actually gave it to me a little bit odd here. I have a quote that then has a new line in it. And this actually provided quite a bit of difficulty in my project because I really wasn't able to handle that new line very easily. I tried using a regex expression in order to capture the quote and the quotee. But regex wasn't a big fan of that new line. So what I ended up doing is I still used regex to capture the quote here, but after I did that, I used the length of my quote to figure out where that new line was, and I removed the quote as well as that new line and captured just the quotee here. So if we'll go ahead and take another step, you'll see that my quote is now almost everything comes from nothing. So I've gone from my response that has a quote followed by a new line character and then dash the quotee. So I have the quote, and then I go ahead and remove the first section to obtain the quotee. And then I'll go ahead and return the data that I've received to the MySQL database is where we're going to be sending that next. But I go ahead and send in the quote, the quotee, as well as the current time in order to tell the database what day we're pulling this quote on. So that's something that I wanted to kind of show here, how we're obtaining that data from the API. And here we have it on our page. Almost everything comes from nothing, and then the quotee. And of course there's no comments about the quote because we just generated it today. But if I wanted to be able to see some comments about a quote, I do have some here on Abraham Lincoln's quote from the 16th, a couple days ago. And so I'll click on the date here to go to that page where I'm able to see his quote. Most folks are about as happy as they make up their minds to be. And here you have the option to submit your opinion about the quote again, and you also can see the comments. So if anybody adds a comment, it'll say the name that they submitted as well as the date, and it will also display their comments. So something else that I want to show is the, let's go ahead and take a look at deleting the comments. Now before I do that, I actually want to go ahead and comment on today's quote. So we'll go back to today's quote. Almost everything comes from nothing. And we'll go ahead and add a comment here. This quote is amazing, right? And we'll submit that. So we've submitted a comment here, and as you can see, it is now being shown on the page. But if we delete this quote, then what's going to happen, right? So I'm going to go ahead and delete today's quote. And when I go to see quotes from this week, that quote no longer exists in the database, so it will generate a new quote from the API. And again, we're going to go ahead and see that quote up here at the top of today's quotes here. And we don't have any comments again because we just generated this. And then below that we have the past week's quotes. So that was essentially what I wanted to go over today, showing how I was able to obtain the quotes from an API. And then something I actually didn't cover is that I utilized Dapper in order to be able to query my results from the MySQL database. So this is my quote repository class where I was able to set up all of the operations that I would send to my MySQL database. So here we have some get operations where we are receiving a quote, and we have some insert here where we are inserting the comment. So I take a comment object and then I obtain the quote ID from that comment, the author, and the content, and all of that information is obtained from the form that the user fills out. So I hope you enjoyed watching my video today as I go over my quote calendar project. I had a lot of fun creating this, and I would love to hear any feedback you have.